Okay, this is John Reed, and now my screen looks all weird. Do I look blue to you guys?
No, you look pink here.
I look pink. Yeah, well, pink is sort of I'm kind of pink-orange. I got some sun.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know why my video screen is flashing blue, but I think as long as you guys can hear me, I think we should be okay. So, welcome to the SAP HCM and S4 HANA discussion. I've got one of the usual suspects and a new one, Sherry Ann Myers. New to my Hangout series. Welcome, Sherry Ann.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You are live from a hotel room in Chicago?
That's right. We'll not reveal the hotel specifically.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to do that. And then we have Chris. We were able to work out the time zones, and you're already into tomorrow, but it's working out.
No, you're still in yesterday, mate.
We're lagging behind here.
So yesterday.
So yes, it's a beautiful morning, winter morning here in Melbourne, in Australia. So good to be with you.
By the way, it'd be interesting to see if the Australian women and the U.S. women end up playing in the World Cup football here, but we'll talk about that later. We'll get some nationalistic rivalries going.
Yes.
But there's a reason for our discussion here today, and the reason for that is because there's been a lot of, I guess you could say, rapidly moving information around SAP HCM as pertains to SAP S4 HANA, and we've had a bunch of conferences and a lot of insights, but also a huge amount of questions. And so a bunch of us were debating this, and Luke Marson, who may be joining us, he's on the side of an Alaskan glacier right now, recently tweeted his surprise at learning that there might be more to the SAP HCM on-premise aspects in S4 HANA than he had first learned. And so what I'd like to do is to have both of you kind of bring us up to date on what you know and what kind of feedback you're getting, and then let's see where we go from there. So, Chris, why don't you start by telling us a story of your recent conference?
Sure. So recently I was in Melbourne at the Mastering Group's conference where they had finance, technology, and HR all lumped together. And we had a whole bunch of people there, and one of those people was David Ludlow. And he was talking about what's coming and what's new in success factors and HCM. And it was almost like a side comment. He mentioned that with S4 HANA, there was going to be no HCM component. And we're like, well, yeah, obviously, because success factors is the new way forward, and you do everything in success factors. And that's kind of great. SAP is putting the focus on success factors being the HCM solution. We thought that was nice. But then he explicitly mentioned there is just no HCM, no payroll, no time, nothing. And then we went, oh, well, that's a bit different, because without the payroll, how do we run payroll? How do we do it? And that was a bit of a wake-up moment for myself, because these things have been put forward previously. I think it was around about February when the S4 HANA announcements were out. Apparently, this kind of line happened then, and I just I dropped the ball. Obviously, I didn't miss it. It was hidden behind all those nice things about saying that success factors is the way forward, which I fully agree with. That's why I'm wearing my success factors shirt here, flying the flag here. But that's kind of a potential problem for a lot of our customers. So I spoke to David and said, what could we do? I ended up having a brief email conversation with Mike Ettling, and
Chris, just real quick, let me just ask you, what's the time frame on this? Is this fairly recently that these conversations happened?
This was fairly recently, so about 3-4 weeks ago.
Okay. And your concern specifically, did it pertain to the cloud versions of S4 HANA or on-premise or both? Or?
No, this was basically all on all of S4 HANA.
Okay.
And the main reason is because here in Australia we have a lot of customers who run their HR solutions and their finance solutions on the same box. So we call them single instance. Yeah. And a lot of those customers are getting very excited about Simple Finance and S4 HANA. Because of all these amazing things that we're seeing coming out for the Simple Finance, and the CFOs getting very excited. No, and rightly so. That's great functionality for them. And then, so I had a conversation with Mike Edling and the Joachim Foda, and we discussed these things, and they said, look, prior to some of your comments, what we're looking to do is, and it will hopefully be announced at HR 2015 in Nice, that SAP will actually be providing a full HCM solution, the existing HCM solution, on the on-premise S/4HANA solution. And it's like, wow, that's like more than I was hoping for. I was just expecting that we'd still be allowed to run payroll. If you say that we're allowed to do the rest, that's kind of cool, bit surprising, but excellent. And then, but at that point, it was still also, we're not entirely sure whether this is going to happen or not, and we may or not announce it. And then I was prodding Martin Gillet, who was at Nice, because he lives in that side of the world, which is in the wrong time zone for having global conferences with. And he took some photos at one of the sessions, and one of those photos basically had the slide deck showing, yes, there will be the option to run ERP HCM on an on-premise S/4HANA solution. And then David followed that up with a post on SCN just recently, where he put forward, pretty much the same thing. He's saying that the future is to go to success factors, but if you are an on-premise customer and you upgrade your on-premise solution to S/4HANA, then you can continue to run ERP solution on it. So that's pretty much where we got to, and my understanding of things is that, and it's a reasonable change around from earlier in the year. I think. Would you agree with that, Sherry?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of our customers and members of ASUG are asking, well, what do I do? You're saying maintenance is going to go away in 2020, or whenever you decide
25.
it's going to go away. What do I do then? Now it's 2025. Right. It could expand beyond that, right?
We have 10 years.
So what do
we
I
have
do?
10
I have
years.
to have
we
my
have
own
10 years
personal
of
roadmap.
runway. We have 10 years of runway. Yeah. That's what I was told.
Yeah, that's a long time in technology years, but as somebody who runs the IT department or a company itself, that's something that you have to have in your strategy, because it's a major expense to change systems, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that is very painful for customers.
Right. Well, I think this one of these things that's really happening, and the points that I was putting to Mike and Joachim was that, look, I'm looking at my customers in Australia, and we have actually the first simple finance customer in the world here. It's here in Melbourne. And but it's going to be a while. Quite honestly, it's going to be a while before anyone else goes down that path. There's people who are interested in it, but this is roadmap stuff for people at the moment, putting it out. But the problem with roadmap is that roadmap sets your strategy and where you're going. Now, if the roadmap says you can't run SAP Payroll, then you find a different thing that you can plug into your roadmap to do your payroll. And that's where it was like,
right.
As soon as you start having those conversations, even if SAP changes and builds out a solution which solves all of our problems, that roadmap, which was done by the big consulting company firm, and published up on very large charts and stuck in the boardroom somewhere, that roadmap has now influenced the culture and has potentially influenced the vendor choice of how things are going to go in the future.
Sherry-Ann,
I think SAP has a...
Sherry-Ann, I want to switch gears for a sec, just because I was distracted when we launched because I'm having all these weird graphics flash on my screen, but I do want viewers to get a little bit of a sense of your role in all this, because you're actually playing a role within ASUG. I called it, what did I call it a minute ago? It was a really good name.
It was a good name. What was it?
It wasn't Diva, but your official title is a community. community evangelist. Is that it?
I'd like to think of myself as a community advocate. Evangelist sounds a little bit too religious. Might scare some people off. So really, I'm an advocate for the customers, right? To talk about things just like this, and we've been talking about it a lot. What happens when SAP makes these decisions, or they put forth this roadmap that's this far into the future, 10 years into the future, 15 years in the future? It doesn't matter. A company has to start planning for that expenditure, right? So my role here is to help customers build their own personal roadmaps, and also to start engaging the SuccessFactors customers more in the ASUG community, because we're seen at ASUG as mainly a technology community and mainly SAP. And those people who are SuccessFactors customers from the beginning don't know SAP. They're aligned with the branding of SuccessFactors. And we need all those stories to help customers of SAP make intelligent decisions going forward. So a lot of what I've been working on is engaging SuccessFactors customers, trying to tell their stories, trying to help people understand the advantages, while at the same time talking to SAP about the messaging they're putting out and how that scares customers, how that makes them feel like their investment that they've made in on-premise is wasted.
Right. And is your information about the roadmap similar to what Chris shared, or has the announcement around the supporting HCM on on-premise S4, has that gotten out there? Is that making sense, or has that not been distributed yet?
Well, it's been distributed, and I had a conversation with David Ludlow last week. Craig Powers and I spoke to him, and I think what's interesting is SAP is really trying hard to maintain their customer base and to help them along this journey that Mike Ettling often talks about when he talks about the snakes and ladders game, right? But it's a difficult story for them to tell, and no matter what they say in the back of customers' minds, the ones that get that something's changing, in the back of their minds is, I have to do something. And these are major changes. And even with the help that SAP is providing, it's helping maybe bridge the gap a little bit more. There'll be less technical help needed because the integration is going to be built by SAP, but it's still a pretty change. And customers are thinking about, do I go to cloud at all? How do I go to cloud? Do I go to cloud for HR? Do I go to cloud for payroll? I'm not quite ready to get there. What do I do in the meantime? Whatever happens, customers have to do something, and I think that's the real challenge for the HR community.
Yeah, I think the message is pretty clear, and it's been consistent from SAP for the last year or so. It's a path to the cloud. It's a path to the cloud that the customer should be able to adopt at their own,
pace.
Level.
Right.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. So it's.
But if you're an HR person, a real HR business person, Chris, that doesn't matter to you. That doesn't mean anything to you. You want the software of choice. You want to be able to deliver something to your employees, and the rest of that is all gibberish.
Yep, I agree. It's actually what, in the end of the day, what actually happens to the end user that's important. But at the other end of the day, there is still a group generally in most of these organizations, which is controlling the IT infrastructure, and a lot of them are pro-SAP. You have a lot of SAP shops, as they like to call themselves, and perhaps those aren't those customers that you're talking about who have previously been SuccessFactors customers and come from that, because they were going best of breed at that time. But I think we are seeing a movement more away from best of breed solutions and towards platform-based solutions, even in the cloud space, because of the cost of integration. Integration is the thing that costs on these implementations. It's not, the implementation. In fact, it's ridiculously low cost to implement most of these SuccessFactors solutions, such that a SI like myself is trying to struggle to figure out how on earth to make any money out of it, which is great for the customer. So but that is good news for the customer. That the bad old days of large cost SAP HR implementations are hopefully somewhere going behind us.
Well, would you agree with that relative to payroll, though, Chris? Would you say that the implementation to rebuild
Well,
payroll
that's
and SuccessFactors Employee Central?
unfortunately, Sherry, you're just some like an aeroplane's flown in between your hotel Wi-Fi and the internet
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
I heard the word payroll.
Could you repeat that question for me, please?
Yeah, sure. The question was, would you say that it's equally easy to implement SAP Payroll, re-implement SAP Payroll and Employee Central with SuccessFactors?
Good gracious. No, I don't think so. I mean, and I think this is also talks a little bit to that integration box that I was talking about. So, the solution for payroll for SuccessFactors, as you know, is SAP Payroll. Yeah, and why not? Because it's one of the most widely used and covers so many countries of the world, tested. You know, there's
14,000 customers, I think 14,000 or something like that. Depends on how you're counting exactly, but something around there.
But there's a lot of people using it. It's a pretty solid solution. You know, it ought to have been. It's been around for so blinking long. It has had a couple of enhancements recently with the ERP on HANA. So there's some new things that are happening on that space. So it works with, and it works pretty well. So okay, great, you've got that solution, but it is a solution that has been built for an on-premise business model. Yeah, so it works on a SAP ERP box, which is an on-premise solution. That was designed to run on-premise. It was never designed to run in the cloud. Yeah. So even when you go to the Employee Central Payroll hosted by SAP, that's just an ERP box running in the cloud hosted by SAP. It's not SaaS as we like to know it, with the multi-tenancy and all the benefits that imbues and so on. It's a single box.
But isn't it still a rebuild for customers?
Pretty much, because there's some things that were raised, like it doesn't do time on that in the SAP version of the solution, which apparently is not so much of a big problem for you guys in the States, but is like an absolute nightmare for us here in Australia.
Just a quick question on that, Chris. I've been trying to catch up on the time piece, and it seems to me that SAP is, from what I understand, is starting to build out some functionality on time, but also supporting a couple of third-party integrations. Is that the current approach?
Yep. So basically,
Travis
Birkin is done with Workforce, and then there's the Kronos integrations into SuccessFactors as well for doing pretty much external time evaluation, and then just importing the number values. But we have the situation here in Australia where I have customers, large customers, major retail, one of the supermarkets, main route supermarkets, and I don't know if it's both of them, but I know at least one of them. They both use SAP products, which is kind of cool. But the main supermarket here, they use Kronos for their time, but the time evaluation, how that results in payment, is all done in SAP, because the SAP solution is more flexible in doing the calculations. So they use the Kronos for doing all the rostering, because quite honestly, SAP rostering is awful. I mean, to non-existent. So if you want to try and do your shift planning in SAP, that's like, no, don't do that. It's a GUI screen from the 1980s, and it wasn't particularly well thought out, and there was no design thinking.
It doesn't still have German words on it, okay?
But I'm going to get in trouble for saying that now. I'm sure I'm going to get a nasty call from someone who says, "Yeah, well, how dare you say that our shift planning is no good?" But
there's someone, Chris. There's someone in Walmart whose whole life is centered around that functionality. You just ruined someone's day, man.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Let me give you a hand to move it up from a DimPro screen to a web DimPro, and then we can think about some UI5 perhaps. No, but still, that's so not going to happen. The customers are using alternate solutions for this, like the rostering kind of idea, and bringing that into SuccessFactors that's calculating the dollar values, pushing it back into the payroll. So there are solutions, and SuccessFactors is bringing in more of the functionality to be able to record attendances from employees, so that you don't necessarily, if you don't have a complex roster, so if you have people who pretty much turn up at work at the same place each week, then you can handle the leave and all of that kind of stuff without having to go to an external system. So it's more, where you have complex time management solutions that we're looking to external stuff, and that's good. And it's really nice that I say this as a partner who's developing solutions which fit on top of SuccessFactors. That SAP are pretty clear that they aren't touching that space at the moment, and that they're leaving that for partners to work with, and that's good, because we've often seen in the past where a partner will bring out a solution for SAP, and then a year later SAP brings out the same solution as an internal product, and partners screwed over and stuff. And I think SAP have noticed that and reacted and been very favorable to working with partners to help make the whole solution a better thing.
Right. And for those who are interested in the extension piece and building on the platform, on the SuccessFactors platform, Chris and I have done a full hangout on that, as well as videos. So hit up on Google search, you should find those. Sherry Ann, I wanted to ask you, I think you and Chris have made a lot of valid points. What do you think SAP needs to do next to address some of these issues? And we look ahead to a little bit of perhaps a break here, a lot of people going on vacation, but then in the fall things kick in pretty heavily with the conference circuit and tech ed shows and various other shows. What do you think SAP needs to do heading into that?
Well, this is interesting, because from a technical perspective, we all understand the complexities. The HR people don't understand the complexities for the most part. So it's mainly your CIOs and your IT management team that's looking at these things and saying, if they're paying attention, what now, right? The HR people are probably totally blindsided. They may already in HR be going off to look at other products, and I think that's the real danger for SAP and for IT organizations, because I don't think necessarily going to another product is the right thing. And it's personal. The roadmap is personal for every single organization, right? But SAP is trying hard to help customers bridge that gap from on-premise to cloud. And so even though they're not the perfect solution, they probably have the best chance of an SAP customer being successful in moving to a cloud solution. As you said before, there's strength in their localization products. What's going to woo customers away is if an HR team can really make a decision without IT interfering to go in another direction, and that will be primarily because they just like what they look and see in the sales pitch that they're given. SAP is the stronger product.
So when you talk about the business users, then it sounds to me like you would want SAP to figure out how to communicate in clear language with those users. Is that part of what you're saying? Right,
and I think that's part of what ASUG is trying to do to bridge that gap. There's going to be lots of different messaging that's going to come out from SAP, and a lot of it is how do you distill that down and help a customer understand. They're only ever going to hear part of it, and so they, consultants right now, that's golden field for them to help be able to understand this and distill the information for customers and help them build their own personal roadmap based on where they are now and where they want to go in the future. What do they really need to do? Not everybody needs to go to everything that the cloud has to offer. It's a beautiful system, but not everybody needs that, and not everybody can afford that right now.
Right. So what would be an example then of the kinds of things that SAP should be saying to business users to help make clear what the value proposition is for them?
Well, the value proposition is a difficult one. So when they're talking to HR business customers, they're primarily using the SuccessFactors marketing style, and they're showing them how user-friendly it is and what it can do and how it can answer all their questions, and that's great. And none of that is not true. The problem is that when that HR person takes it back to their technical team, it's not that easy to implement. So somehow, and we've been talking to SAP about this, how do you bring the IT and the business user together so that you don't get hung up later, that they're both at the table together understanding what's necessary to make the next move, and they can carefully plan it together.
Yeah. Where I see it from, John, is that we've got this next step where S/4HANA has been put forward as being a SAP's almost answer to the SaaS ERP. You know, certainly the public cloud version of S/4HANA is. This is going to be SAP's move to an ERP in the cloud. There will still be the on-premise version of it, but there is going to be a version which is public cloud, which you have very limited ability to modify and so on, but it will still provide all the power and the functionality of the on-premise SAP solution. And that's a great argument because people have been wanting cloud ERP. They don't want to have to run data centers. People are realizing that it is not their core competency to run a data center. They want to have the software to run their business, not have to hire a team of people to run the software to run their business to that extent. And so that makes a great idea. The problem is we've got a gap now here with the HCM piece. And it's not a gap with the talent or the employees. It's a gap with that time and payroll component that I was talking about, which is so important. Where does that fit when you start talking about actually moving your entire business to the cloud? And this is around that roadmap kind of space that I'm talking about. So if we're engaging those technical people as well as the HR people are they don't. As I think Sherry mentioned earlier, they don't care whether it's running in the cloud or whether it's running in your dishwasher. I want the damn thing to do. It works. It looks pretty on my screen, and it does the functionality I need. Look here. I can click and I can find the people that I need to fill this role, and I buy the qualifications that are needed for that role. That's what I want. And it pays them every week. Brilliant. That's what I want. Where it runs, I don't care. So it's when you're engaging the whole, the CIO level and saying, okay, now we have a cloud, and the value proposition for you with this cloud ERP is we're going to get rid of your need for the data centers. We're going to get rid of your, that team that you have to do building it, and just provide you with this great software. And then all of a sudden we've got, but if you want to run payroll, you're still going to need an SAP ERP box somewhere.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, wow.
Well, Chris, I don't want to get
from a total
too...
cost of ownership, you're missing it, right? The company's not making out.
Well, Chris, I don't want to get too sidetracked by an S4HANA discussion, but I would challenge you a little bit just based on my reviews of S4HANA of late, because I'm not really totally convinced about the SASE cloud ERP side of S4HANA right now. SAP hasn't really demonstrated to me how serious they are about the public cloud version of that. I think it's really more about the real realization of ERP on HANA. I think it's really more about really making ERP on HANA live up to its potential. I mean, you heard Hasso talk about getting rid of aggregates and the speed at which these things can happen. I think it's about refactoring ERP for a HANA world, and I think SAP is more determined on that side because they can do that on-premise or in the cloud. It does, though, raise a lot of questions in terms of how that works for HCM, right? Because SAP has said from the beginning they're not planning to do that on the HCM side, right? They're not planning to refactor for HANA. In fact, they're planning to run SuccessFactors on HANA, which is another topic of discussion as far as a much delayed scenario. And there's a lot of reasons SAP has given for why SuccessFactors on HANA is running behind schedule from what they initially proclaimed exuberantly a couple of years ago or whenever it was. Just as a quick update, the latest is Mike Ettling has said that September of 2016 is the objective for having SuccessFactors run. The way he put it was without any trace of red in the database. But at any rate, I think regardless of exactly what happens with S/4HANA and the SASE public cloud aspects, the fact that it is on HANA does raise a lot of questions for customers in terms of, will my current applications run in that environment, and if so, how? And like you said, if it's just a hosted cloud solution, that might work great for business users, but for IT people, that really might not fit with the next generation landscapes that they're hoping to create.
Yeah, I agree with your point that the main reason for S/4HANA is to pare down the solution to make it such that the integration and add-ons that you can attain for running it straight on the HANA database make it work faster. If you've got random different solutions which are throwing together all sorts of aspects of aggregates and creating these additional tables which aren't used by most of the solutions, then yeah, pare them down, don't use them, and then wow, you've got this amazing functioning solution. Put on top of it a new UI with all the Fiori stuff, and then it looks great. Yes, the side impact is, of course, you have to be able to say that you're working with cloud at the moment. If you don't get cloud into, so yeah, it makes sense, and customers are, I think, customers are seeing other cloud vendors pushing forward, and I think this is potentially, because the public cloud version of S/4HANA doesn't exist, yeah?
Right.
It's not, well, it may exist somewhere in Waldorf hidden behind the scenes, but it's not something that you can go out and use right now, yeah? It's the on-premise version of S/4HANA, which is the thing which you can use right now. So the other ones,
yeah, I believe there's a limited public cloud version available with some functionality, but I wouldn't want to be quoted on where that stands right now. But your point is still well taken. I wanted to step back for a sec on one other thing that fits into this, which is I've been listening lately in preparation to keep up with you guys, Steve Bogner and his crowd and their excellent HCM Insight podcasts. I'm not attempting to by any means replace what they do. This is more a peanut gallery version of that, but I recommend anyone who's serious about these issues to check them out. But one of the things that came out in their last discussion, there were two big points. One was roadmap confusion from the customer side, and the second was need for migration tools. They feel like that SAP needs to work hard to avoid a rip and replace kind of perception on the customer's part, right? That, in other words, moving to SuccessFactors would mean like essentially starting over, so I might as well look at every possible solution. And the way to do that is through a sophisticated set of migration tools. That was really one of the big messages. What do you feel about those thoughts?
Look, I think for customers who... do you want to go first, Sherry?
I was just going to say that this hits near and dear to home because at Sapphire we approached Adam Kalpleski, who works for Dimitri, and asked him about what does this payroll roadmap look like. And we've asked David Ludlow recently too, do you have a payroll roadmap? And they're still developing that. So it's just kind of interesting. Payroll is the most critical component of any HR function, and we don't really have a roadmap for it yet. Obviously SAP recognizes that, but that's a little disappointing.
Yeah, because I was going to say, from the payroll point, this is actually one of the key continuity pieces that happens when you have a discussion about SuccessFactors, and one of the key reasons why you don't move to, a competitor product, because I'm still running my on-premise payroll. I might be using Employee Central to get all the data from the employees and present it to them in new, wonderful mobile app versions, and and see all of the things on the screen. But I'm still very happy with this rock solid piece of solution that I've got, so I don't have to change it. And that speaks a huge volume to the why go with this SuccessFactors solution rather than go with anything else, because the integration is, it's there. it's delivered. There is, be it the world's simplest integration to put in. No, but it's a hell of a lot simpler than if I were to try and take, the same an external payroll solution and try and integrate that one to Employee Central, or take an external HCM solution and try and get all the data that I need out of that and put it into SAP Payroll. Because if I use a different payroll solution, then I'm going to have to build a different finance interface somewhere. So I've got that other complexity. I've already built this thing. It's working on my system. Let's not mess with it too much. Because I don't think people are crying out for a new payroll right now. Much as I would love to deliver a new payroll, I think there are. I think that there are some things that can be done, especially with HANA now, that would make the existing SAP payroll completely obsolete. But that's not a customer desire, Yes, you would be able to free up more people in your team.
I think it was different. People really needed a new payroll system for the most part. And there was a lot of rallying around the SAP software back in 2000 because people had just come through the millennium. They breathed a sigh of relief, but they were worried that their systems weren't stable for the future. So there was a real driver there to look at new software solutions. But what's the driver now to look for a new payroll solution?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's about, can I have something which looks amazing on my iPad? Can I have something which handles labor coming from different sources? I've got, so with this story of potential integration from Fieldglass, that's a really a big thing that could be happening there. How are we going to manage that contingent labor side? These are exciting stories which interest people, and they certainly can see them on the roadmap. If I'm looking into the future, and I'm a business right now, I can see that contingent labor is going to be coming. So what I want to do is I want to look to a solution that can potentially address that in the future. So we go, oh, what can I do? Oh, yes, look, SAP, they've purchased Fieldglass, they've got SuccessFactors, they're talking about putting them together. I don't know what they're going to do, but I have this feeling that they're going to do something, and I'm being hugely optimistic, as well. I love the product, but the point being is that there is some view that you can see of things happening, and that's where, I think I agree with you, Sherry. I'm quite disappointed that I don't see this payroll roadmap for customers and how they're going to work it out, and how it's working.
But Chris, you're not. I think we all agree on the more public the roadmap, the better. I have felt that SAP has relied too much, for example, on this is in Service Marketplace, and that doesn't work well for me.
Doesn't work for me either.
That's really good if you're not a customer of SAP, isn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's funny because
we have the same thing with SuccessFactors as well. If you don't own SuccessFactors, you can't read anything.
Right. It's funny because I know that SAP is probably frustrated about this, but the thing is that they've said this in gatherings that include analysts and bloggers who have no access to Service Marketplace, and so and it's interesting because the transparency, I think, is changing, right? Because one of the things that came up on a recent podcast from Steve's group was that Sven Ringling, who's in that group, was looking for information on time, and he really couldn't find in the public domain all the answers to the questions you guys were talking about in terms of cloud versus on-premise and time. So he went ahead and blogged on it, and he did his best with, here's the information I have. But the problem, of course, is that he's not SAP, right? And so it seems like there's a role for SAP to be really publicly transparent, and I know that's really tough because vendors aren't used to putting roadmap stuff out in public, but I think more and more that's where people want it to be.
Look, I would be even happy. So when we went back to Success Connect last year in Vegas, and they showed the roadmap slide, and I was told that there was going to be a roadmap slide shown during the keynote. Yeah. And it actually just turned out to be a slide with a hell of a lot of words written all over it, and there was Fiori down in one corner, and then there was, time management up in here, and timesheets was there, and it didn't give a lot of detail, it didn't give timings, but what it did do was actually point out to the audience there that these are the things that we are specifically considering, and even if it was, some of there was an awful lot of caveats put around about the screen, these are the things that we're considering, no guarantee of delivery in any particular time frame or anything like that, and that's fine, but it did give the audience some idea of what was happening. Now, personally, I would love to see something a little bit more detailed, which actually had some timelines, against it. Predicted delivery, 2015, predicted delivery 2016, those kind of things, and list of stuff. That would be awesome. Understand that becomes very hard, ties down vendors into very difficult positions, and all that, stuff that they don't like to do.
Right.
But hell, wouldn't it be nice just to have a little bit more of that?
Sherry Ann, with ASA, do you guys prefer to have sort of back channel reviews of roadmaps, or would you prefer to have more in the public domain, or what would you like to see?
I don't know. We like them in the public domain. I mean, that's the biggest draw when we do any kind of conferences, to be able to have the roadmaps delivered by SAP. And have the discussion right there live about what it means. Give it a little sync time, and then have people do some more dialogue about it directly with us and with SAP. It's necessary because I think it's especially necessary for SAP to keep their customers happy. We all know direction's going to change. Tell me when. Tell me how. Let's be honest about it, and I'll deal with it. I'll make my plans. And by the way, I think that's one thing Mike Etling has been very good about in his keynotes and his speaking about this. He's very direct and clear about what he understands the direction to be at the time. We just need a little bit more on the critical functions like payroll.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, Chris, you're not suggesting necessarily that SAP rewrite SAP Payroll how are you going to get the on-premise folks into a cloud version of that? Are you would be you'd be more of an advocate for better migration of success factors, right?
What I would really like to see is, yes, something which enables customers to, if they have the current SAP on-premise, to be able to just take that to an SAP cloud. So if it and run that solution.
I agree.
How on earth they can do that? Because unfortunately, the way that SAP Payroll is written at the moment is, single instance, single tenant. To
so
most extent.
You're talking about a managed cloud, probably in that sense.
And that's pretty much what EC Payroll is. Employee Central Payroll, it is a managed cloud, but it's a managed integrated cloud. So you have all that nice integration, but you're pretty much talking about rewriting your payroll to fit that managed cloud solution. And even when you're talking about
rewrite it, and that's scary.
Yeah, even when you're talking about companies like my own, so there's a limit to how many employees. Well, there isn't actually a limit. There's I would say a minimum limit. There isn't a minimum limit, but there's a minimum price.
A break-even point.
Yeah, it's pretty much. If you want to pay $10,000 for each employee that you run payroll for, there is no problem there. We can handle that. No worries. But the problem there's in order to use the Employee Central payroll component, there's about a minimum employee level that you need to break even with, and that becomes problematic. So you have companies like my own who set up basically multi-tenant SAP solutions where the payroll's even more restricted than if you were to move to Employee Central Payroll. So Employee Central Payroll, you have your own choice, and you can pretty much do some. You can install your own tools on top of the box as well, and that's okay as long as you're not messing with any of the SAP configuration, because SAP managed that side of it. So you can do those kind of other fun things. But there's no way that, like if I'm in my little multi-tenant version of the cloud payroll, I'm not going to let you do that, because I have to have a lot of strict control in order to be able to allow it to do that multi-tenancy. So you're getting a sliding scale of flexibility for the cost per user, and the total cost that enable to do it. And that's, it would be really nice. What I would love SAP to do, or what I'd really love them to do, is to figure out how they can just spin up little elastic SAP instances in the same kind of way that Amazon AWS, I can run an SAP instance on AWS, and it could be there, and it could integrate from SuccessFactors, and they could help set up all that integration so it goes backwards and forwards, and then when I need it, it bangs up the processing power and I run my payroll, and then when I don't need it, it scrunches it back down again, and it's able to pull out pay slips as needed. And that kind of a flexible cloud solution provided by SAP, that would be awesome. I would really like that. But how that's going to come around, I don't know.
Hey, a guy can dream.
Yeah. Well, I was just reflecting back, John. 2 years ago, I wrote a Blue Sky piece about what I thought was going to happen in the world. It's quite interesting reflecting back on actually how many of those things have now turned around and actually eventuated, and how many of them haven't.
Yeah, and I will give SAP credit. They listen to these conversations, and not just the first few minutes. They will listen to this whole thing, and
I'm in trouble now.
They'll hear your Blue Sky ideas, and maybe some of them will resonate with what they're working on. So,
I think Chris isn't that far off. I think there are ideas like that. For example, there is no benefit solution for the U.S. right now, but it wouldn't be that hard for them to meet a customer's need and spin something up separately to enable customers to continue to run benefits, right? So I think the realm of the possible is anything, and I think customers have to have a voice to let SAP know what they need.
One thing I really do like about what SAP has been up to the last number of months is I started hearing some pretty good feedback around what Mike Ettling was up to, and his role is somewhat unique inside of SAP because his role is HCM, like on-premise and cloud, like he owns the whole thing.
Line of business.
And when I met with him with a couple other bloggers, Dennis Howlett and Brian Summer at Sapphire, for the first time, I was really impressed with Mike. I thought that he communicated pretty transparently with us about some pretty tough questions around S4 HANA, around moving SuccessFactors onto HANA, and also I thought he had quite a good grasp of the geopolitical issues around cloud, which are going to be a big factor in the years to come, issues like data sovereignty and things like that, and he spent a lot of time thinking about that, and he also talked pretty extensively about creating a test and production version of SuccessFactors, which Chris gets back to your point a little bit. And he talked about all the success they've had with crowdsourcing, unit testing on that platform. And I like what he had to say, and I think leadership is, in my opinion, a big piece of the puzzle because, I'll be honest with you, I didn't always see that from the SuccessFactors side. I mean, after Lars left for quite a while there, I had a lot of questions as to where this was all going. And even when Lars was there, he seemed like he was in a classic sort of dilemma around the acquired CEO, right, and finding his way inside SAP, and clearly that didn't really quite stick to the wall, though I do know some people who claim he's had a lasting impact on how they view cloud there, but the point being that there was a real gap, and I think the current leadership I'm pretty impressed with, I have to say.
I would agree with that, and I think Mike's built a strong leadership team around himself.
Right.
I've worked with several of them. They're great. You're right, it is about the leadership. What impressed me most about Mike when he spoke for ASUG at Sapphire in his keynote was that he was completely willing for me to put customers up on stage with him that were hardcore on-premise customers and answer their questions dead on. And there's nothing really a customer can say back to that when you're being honest with them except to figure out their own personal roadmap.
Right.
I think honesty is always best, and he comes across very straightforward with that, and so that builds trust.
I would suggest the very fact that we're having a conversation about SAP having changed the way that they're going to do something, and based on feedback that's come through to them, is a strong indicator of how things are changing, yeah, and in a good way. That a couple of months ago, there was no payroll and HCM on the S/4HANA space, and now there is, albeit only on the on-premise space. That is
we probably should address. That is pretty cool, but we probably should address the fact that Luke Marston isn't happy with that, right?
Yeah.
Luke is clearly stuck on the side of a glacier somewhere, so he's not here.
So he's enjoying the fact that it's midday sun over there in Alaska, and probably cracking over some craft beers that he's just chilled down in the glacier, I would imagine. Luke was pretty adamant that he thought it was a good idea that customers really did start thinking about making the move away from the on-premise HCM to a newer solution. I don't necessarily disagree too much with that. If you're putting your roadmap together, then probably if HCM, the roadmap has to be to going to SuccessFactors if you're going to stay with SAP. My problem is that even now we have issues where the SuccessFactors solution just can't meet all the needs of customers at the moment.
Okay.
So this is especially true in Australia for the public sector organizations. So we have issues where some of these wonderful things where if you do your boss's job for a couple of days, you get paid at your boss's pay rate and stuff. These are wonderful things that governments do, but no one else does.
It
sounds like a great idea, doesn't it, John?
It sounds pretty good, actually, now that you mention it.
That's the same. There's things like that in other countries too, so that's not unique. And I think what's troublesome for some of the customers in the U.S. is that they have very unique labor laws that aren't run by the government, that are run by their own unique union agreements, and they're not all handled in the SuccessFactors payroll solution. And the question is still out, how do you handle it?
So I take it, Sherry-Ann, that you support SAP's recent decision to support on-premise HCM and S/4HANA.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's going to be a win-win for them.
What I'd have to say, though, I was kind of surprised to see the learning solution and e-recruitment still being supported within that S/4HANA space, because I was like, I think
learning solution isn't that surprising, because it's not just an HR product. It's used in EH&S and some other components that it's kind of free. So I think that's where that got the push over there.
Because you'd see, okay, I'll buy your point about learning, but e-recruitment, I mean, that really just should have been shot.
Well, e-recruitment I don't get.
Should have been shot a long time ago. But I suppose that the point is, if there's a customer still using it, it's because they haven't got any money to migrate away from it. I would guess, and they've got, so they can't use something else, so they'd be kind of stuck, and fair enough. But I see to Luke's point a little bit about, wouldn't you really just want to make a clean break and say, okay, if you're going to do this S/4HANA stuff, then start thinking about your overall environment, and not going this other way is going to be different. But even with it enabled, I think there's still a couple of questions that we've got there, as like S/4HANA came with this promise of a renovated user experience, which was all based around Fiori, and we know that that's an ongoing story. Not everything in S/4HANA has a Fiori interface for it just yet, but that's the idea. But when from what I'm hearing, and this is a question I don't know the answer to, from what I'm hearing about the ERP on S/4HANA, so the HCM on S/4HANA, is Well, that's where it's at right now. So we've got HR Renewal 2, look and feel. But given that the business view is that we are going for this is an interim state for customers who can't yet migrate to SuccessFactors, not an ongoing solution for customers. And that's my view from my interpretation of what I'm reading, that they're not going to do things, or perhaps they won't do things like build out Fiori launchpads for tiles for all of the HCM components. So you're looking at, so S4HANA goes, hey, we have the Fiori launchpad, that's how you run S4HANA, but you're using the ERP HCM components, and they're not going to be built out for that user interface. So you're probably going to still have to use a portal to integrate those components into your solution. Because like the HR Renewal 2 components, there are some Fiori HR components, but it's not across the whole suite. And I don't know whether that's going to get built out. And from what I can read between the lines, I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. Do you have any views or news on that, Sherry?
Question. I think that the customers I've spoken to with HR Renewal, they're grateful to have something that makes things more user-friendly without having to toss out the whole system. So from their perspective, if you're on-premise and you've dealt with some clunky usability, the enhancements that are delivered with the renewal products are great. They're not overly concerned about it being further developed out. I think some customers are exploring doing some customization, some builds themselves, but especially in the public sector, that's received very well. Whatever's being given to them is being received very well, and there aren't a lot of issues with it.
No, I think people love the HR Renewal 2 stuff, and but it's very much been in many cases, the forerunner of Fiori. And just we do this every time with HR. Why don't we go first before everyone else happens? And that's how we ended up with WebDimpro Java and all of that kind of fun stuff.
Right.
Playing the persecution card, I see. Well, we have been going on. We have been going on for an hour.
Well, I think HR has been the primary customer base that's been crying for usability. I mean.
Sure.
HR is different, and I know some people hate to hear that, but every single employee touches the system. It's not like any other product that's delivered in the finance area or any other area. When you have every single employee touching the system, it has to be quick and easy to use, or your productivity suffers.
Well, we pretty much threw Luke under the bus during the discussion.
I hope you're enjoying your beers, Luke. Yeah.
See, Luke, for not showing up.
See, Luke, you made a fateful decision. I think you'll agree. But one thing I will say on Luke's behalf is that I talk with a lot of customers, do a lot of interviews, SAP and otherwise, and I really don't talk with a lot of customers who I would say are kicking ass in their industry, who are running a bunch of old software. I just don't. I think modernizing your IT landscape and becoming more agile, more cloud, more mobile, whatever it is a big part of how customers need to compete. But at the same time, I do have a lot of sympathy with the idea that needs to be done on your own timetable and have a lot of options. So I'm not saying I don't agree with SAP's decision. I do, but I think sometimes we cut customers almost. Sorry, Sherry Ann, because you represent customers here on the call, but. I think sometimes we cut customers a little too much slack sometimes in the sense that we do need to challenge customers as well in the sense of like business is moving really fast right now and it does make sense to look at how you modernize and what that means and what the benefits are. But anyway, and I think
it's not a once and done thing, and I think that's a mistake a lot of customers make. They think I'm going to plug this in and forevermore my problems will be gone because it's in cloud and I get all the enhancements automatically. Well, you don't. You get the fixes automatically, but you still have to care and maintain your system and constantly be reviewing your processes. So there's still work.
Yeah, the cloud is not a cure-all for those things.
Right.
It's really more. I think it gets back to your point around the IT business conversation. The interesting thing about cloud is that it provokes those conversations, and it's the underlying conversations that I think are very provocative and important. Right. Not necessarily which technology you choose.
Exactly.
So,
There's
All
still
right,
some
well,
people out there smarting in HR from having to implement SAP 10, 12 years ago. So
sure.
this is their chance to have their voice heard.
Yeah, Chris, when you said earlier that HR was a real old solution, it kind of scared me a little bit because I can remember the first release. I hope you guys can't remember that. Hopefully you were still licking popsicles in the park.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's where I was.
Okay, good. So, out of sympathy for those who feel obligated to listen to the entire thing, I think we should wrap. Do you guys have any last words? Give me the 30 to 60 second wrap of anything you'd like to emphasize or that we didn't cover.
Well, I think the story's still unfolding, and I think it's going to keep unfolding. I think it's conversations like this, and it's conversations through ASUG that can help customers keep abreast of it. Technology changes extremely rapidly, and no matter what solution you choose, no matter what technical solution you choose or what company you choose, you need somebody in your company staying informed and staying abreast of it. And so I think the best solutions for HR remain hand in hand and have a close partnership with their IT department and be willing to keep learning about these things.
Chris?
Wow, I've got to follow that one up. So what I'd like to take away from the conversation today is that I'm very impressed that SAP listened to external feedback. I'd love that they take the external feedback before, and so we get these things happening earlier in the piece before initial official announcements happen, which do things like take away HCM from S from HANA. But that there is that feedback loop, and it's important for customers especially to voice when they're seeing these things, and it's important for external engagers and influencers to stick up their hand when they see something which they don't agree with, because unless we do that, when we just follow along like sheep, and what is clear is now that we have a space where people are willing to listen to us, and I think that's a really good and important thing.
Cool. I'll just wrap by saying thanks to both of you. You guys were awesome, and I think we managed to get 90% of Sherry Ann's audio, which isn't bad given she's in a crappy hotel room internet connection. And also, we accidentally invited a ton of people to this hangout, and then had to cancel that because we needed to do like just a little roundtable discussion. But there seemed to be a lot of community interest in this topic, and so I'm definitely open to doing this again and just opening it up as more of a free-form reaction to what we talked about. So that's something to think about. I'm not committing these two to joining, but that's certainly
awesome.
an option.
Thanks. Yes.
Yeah. So you guys are not committed to doing that, but those who are watching, if you're interested in that, let us know, and maybe in the next few weeks or month or whenever work around vacations, we can come back and do that. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.
Awesome.
Wave.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Give a wave. All right.
Bye.